low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, April 3rd, Friday. Your readers today are
J.J. Patek
and Don Williams. Beginning with weather, I take a look at the week, and it reminds me of the old saying, if you don't like the weather here in Buffalo, wait 5 minutes. Well, today,
tell me about it.
Yeah, windy with a few showers today with a high of 68 and a low of 40. A passing shower or two tomorrow with a high of 71 and a low of 44. Sunday, cooler with a high of 45 and a low of 32. Back to freezing again for the next couple days. Snow and rain in the afternoon on Monday with a high of 40 and a low of 29. Snow and rain in the morning on Tuesday with a high of 37 and a low of 24. Ouch.
Good grief.
Yes, Sunday and not as cold on Wednesday with a high of 47 and a low of 42, and rain in the morning on Thursday. Well, it's April, so I guess you expect some April
call it
showers.
Spring because the temperatures go up and down like a slinky.
Indeed. Well, the area almanac shows us high and low temperatures through yesterday afternoon were pretty much in line with the averages, long-term averages. 44 for a high yesterday compared to a low of, or a normal high of 48, and a low of 33 compared to the average of 31. Record high 16 years ago, it was 79 degrees, and in 1881, that's pretty much back in the reaches of statistical information available here. Record low of 17 that year. Last year was 56 and 31. A bit more of a temperature swing than we're expecting today. Just a couple of hundredths of an inch of snow. A couple of hundredths of an inch of rain yesterday. No snow. They're about to shut off the snow derby.
Pretty soon.
Yeah, well, they're still showing it here, but nothing months to date in the big cities they cover here.
Well, they're getting big snowstorms out in the Midwest today. Ice storms, too.
I keep seeing these pop-up alerts on my phone. Heavy snow forecast, and there's 5 states. We talked about this last week, didn't we? Hawaii.
North Dakota. Wisconsin.
Well, the sun rose today, not that you could see it, at 6:54 a.m., and it'll set tonight at 7:44. Let's see, where's the phases of the moon? It was just full not long ago, so the last quarter will be on the 10th of April. There's still some ski conditions being listed here, but variable in spring conditions, and
I don't think I want to ski today.
There's not a lot out there. Hollymont's got a big base, and Holiday Valley and Bristol Mountain, they have a pretty good sized base, but that's about it. Not much of a skiing conditions. I think you don't want to do that anyway. McAllen, Texas had the high temperature yesterday nationally at 93, and Frenchville, Maine with a low of 13 nationally. So there's your weather for today. What's on the front page?
What's on the front page? A sad story. Shah Alam faced difficult 5 days before his death. This is from John Harris. In the 5 days between when he was dropped off by federal agents to when he was found dead in February, Nurul Amin Shah Alam experienced dehydration, hunger, hypothermia, and intense abdominal pain from an ulcer that had bored through part of his small intestine. What a horrible way to die, said Terrence M. Connors, an attorney representing Shah Alam's family. I can't believe what those 5 days must have been like. More information about Shah Alam's final days are emerging after the Wednesday disclosure that the Erie County Medical Examiner had ruled his death a homicide. That finding is not an accusation that a crime was committed, but it means that the autopsy, which has not been publicly released, showed Shah Alam's death was caused by the actions of another person. Shah Alam, a mostly blind Rohingya refugee, went missing after he was released on bond from the Erie County Holding Center into the custody of U.S. Customs and Border Protection agencies. The agents on February 19th dropped him off several miles from his home at a Tim Hortons on Niagara Street after his dining room had closed. Shah Alam, 56, was found dead on February 24th on Perry Street near Key Bank Center. Connors said the autopsy report showed that Shah Alam was placed into a hostile environment that he could not reasonably be expected to extricate himself from. We are looking closely at the failures that placed him in this hostile environment and resulted in his tragic and difficult 5 days in the cold weather, resulting in the drop in his body temperature below 95 degrees, as well as evidence of dehydration and evidence of starvation, ketoacidosis, Connors said Thursday. The county medical examiner's office determined Shah Alam's cause of death to be complications of a perforated duodenal ulcer precipitated by hypothermia and dehydration. While it is difficult to know exactly when Shah Alam developed the ulcer, the perforation of it, the breakthrough of the ulcer into the rest of his abdomen, which is considered a medical emergency, would have likely occurred in those 5 days from when Border Patrol agents dropped Shah Alam off at the Tim Hortons to when he was found dead near Key Bank Center, said Dr. Stephen M. Schweitzberg, chair of the Department of Surgery at the University at Buffalo's Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. Schweitzberg, who is not involved in Shah Alam's case, spoke to the Buffalo News as an independent expert with decades of medical experience. It's hard to know, but if you add the stress of hypothermia, the malnutrition, the dehydration, it would not be hard to imagine those as risk factors for progression of disease and perforation, says Schweitzberg, also the director of surgical programs at Kaleida Health and Erie County Medical Center. If he had perforated ulcer in the holding center, he'd be pretty sick. So he probably had some pre-existing disease that worsened in those 5 days for sure. The findings this week only heightened calls from elected officials for a full investigation into Shah Alam's death. The Department of Homeland Security has referred reporters to its statements in late February when the department says Shah Alam, after the agents determined he was in the country legally, agreed to be left at the coffee shop. Shah Alam, the department says, showed no signs of distress, mobility issues, or disabilities requiring special assistance. This death has nothing to do with Border Patrol, DHS posted on X on Thursday morning. Mr. Alam passed almost a week after he was released by Border Patrol. In a statement Wednesday evening, Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan called the medical examiner's findings about Shah Alam's death deeply disturbing. What happened here reflects a fundamental failure to treat a human being with basic dignity and care, and it demands accountability, he said. Governor Kathy Hochul, who previously visited with Shah Alam's widow and 2 of his children, said in a statement that her team has spoken with Erie County District Attorney Michael Kane and is glad to hear his office investigating. As more details in this case emerge, I want to be crystal clear. Every individual involved in the death of Mr. Shah Alam must be held fully accountable, Hochul said. In addition, Connors said his team is conducting its own investigation and having medical experts review the autopsy. Shah Alam's family, Connors said, has directed him to examine the facts and circumstances in the case with the goal of bringing light and correcting any failures that occurred to ensure this doesn't happen again to anyone else. This was a family that escaped genocide and what the United Nations has called ethnic cleansing in Burma to come to the United States, and he died in the road in the land of the free, Connor said. They don't want this to ever happen again to anyone else. In his reading of the timeline, Schweitzberg, the longtime surgeon, said various factors combined to create a fatal cascade of events. While it's difficult to pinpoint the origin of Shah Alam's ulcer, Schweitzberg explained that doctors have learned in the past 30 years that ulcer disease is mostly precipitated by a bacteria called H. pylori, which can be endemic and affects large swaths of the global population. Those with H. pylori infection are at a higher risk for developing ulcer disease. It's unclear whether Shah Alam could have an unrecognized H. pylori infection, but it's clear that he encountered stress, whether at the holding center or in those 5 days missing amid the bitter cold. At a news conference Wednesday, the Erie County Commissioner, Dr. Gail Burstein, described the ulcer that Shah Alam had as basically a stress ulcer. This is actually precipitated by our body's physiologic responses to severe stress, and that stress was felt to be hypothermia, being in very cold temperature, and dehydration, so no access to liquids, Burstein said. To complicate matters further, the body's response to a severe intestinal event, such as a perforated ulcer, is to take fluid out of the bloodstream to pool in the abdomen, worsening dehydration, Schweizberg said. Hypothermia, meanwhile, is a very complicated topic that's not well understood by the public, explained Schweizberg, who spent a lot of time researching hypothermia and evaluating ways to treat it early in his career. Hypothermia can be thought of in 3 states: mild, moderate, and severe. Most people are familiar with mild hypothermia when the body's core temperature is 90 to 95 degrees. The heart rate increases, and so does shivering. But as the body temperature gets colder, the shivering stops, which is a bad sign, and cognitive dysfunction increases. Schweizberg said that a person with even moderate hypothermia can be confused with someone who's drunk. So on top of that fact, he's partially blind, and on top of the fact that he's dehydrated, the onset of even the early stages of hypothermia impairs mental functioning, he explained. They can't make it any better. That can only make it worse. Schweizberg stressed that when someone is on the ground with hypothermia, that is a medical emergency, even if they're still moving. I think the greatest value that we can educate people is that a down patient in our city, and given our weather patterns, should be immediately called to 911 because of the risk of hypothermia, he said, noting that it doesn't have to be 20 degrees outside for someone to become profoundly hypothermic. A patient with a perforated ulcer, whether coming from home or the holding center, or off the street, would need treatment that includes resuscitation, he said. In Shah Alam's case, the poor access to food and fluids had complications and magnifies the implication of the perforated ulcer, he noted. Intestinal perforation is deadly if untreated. The initial treatment would obviously require resuscitation even before surgical correction. He was way behind on his fluid status before being exposed in those days, Schweizberg said. Even if he had gotten to an emergency room, 12 hours earlier, this could have been hard to recover from. And commenting on the conditions in which Alam was dropped off, Schweizberg said anybody with a lick of common sense could have known the weather was so bitter cold that would threaten a person's life. You don't have to be a trained doctor to figure that out, he said. That's sad.
Sad. And it gets worse when the Department of Homeland Security is saying, not our fault. It took almost a week to die.
It's somebody's fault.
That's not how they said it, but that's how it comes down to. Well, meanwhile, Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press reports that 4 astronauts embarked on a high-stakes flight around the moon Wednesday, humanity's first lunar voyage in more than half a century, and the thrilling lead-off in NASA's push toward a landing in 2 years. Carrying 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, the 32-story rocket rose from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where tens of thousands gathered to witness the dawn of this new era. Crowds also jammed the surrounding roads and beaches, reminiscent of the Apollo moonshots in the 1960s and 70s. It is NASA's biggest step yet toward establishing a permanent lunar presence. On this historic mission, you take with you the heart of this Artemis team, the daring spirit of the American people and our partners across the globe, and the hopes and dreams of a new generation, launch director Charlie Blackwell Thompson told the crew right before liftoff. Good luck. Godspeed, Artemis 2. Let's go. Artemis 2 set sail from the same Florida launch site that sent Apollo astronauts to the moon so long ago. The handful still alive cheered this next generation's grand adventure as the Space Launch System rocket thundered into the early evening sky, a nearly full moon beckoning some 248,000 miles away. 5 minutes into the flight, Commander Reed Weissman saw the team's target. "We have a beautiful moonrise. We're headed right at it," he said from the capsule. On board of them are pilot Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Canada's Jeremy Hansen. It is the most diverse lunar crew ever, with the first woman, person of color, and non-U.S. citizen riding in NASA's new Orion capsule. NASA is back in the business of sending astronauts to the moon, as NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman told reporters following liftoff. calling the half-century hiatus a brief intermission. Half-century is brief now. Tensions were high earlier in the day as hydrogen fuel started flowing into the rocket. Dangerous hydrogen leaks erupted during a countdown test earlier this year, forcing a lengthy flight delay. To NASA's relief, no significant hydrogen leaks occurred. The launch team loaded more than 700,000 gallons of fuel into the 32-story Space Launch System rocket on the pad, a smooth operation that set the stage for the Artemis II crew to board. Then NASA had to overcome a flurry of last-minute technical issues, bad battery sensors, and an inability to get commands through to the rocket's flight termination system. In both cases, the issues were quickly resolved, allowing the launch to proceed. The astronauts will stick close to home for the first 25 hours of their 10-day test flight, checking out the capsule in orbit around Earth before firing the main engine that will propel them to the moon. They won't pause for a stopover or orbit the moon like Apollo 8's first lunar visitors did so famously on Christmas Eve 1968, reading from Genesis, but they stand to become the first distant humans ever when their capsule become the most distant humans ever when their capsule zooms past the moon and continues another 4,000 miles beyond, before making a U-turn and tearing straight home to a splashdown in the Pacific. Once settled on a high orbit around Earth, the astronauts assumed manual control and practiced steering their capsule around the rocket's detached upper stage, venturing as close as 33 feet. NASA wants to know how Orion handles in case the self-flying feature fails and the pilots need to take control. During Monday's lunar flyby, the moon will appear to be the size of a basketball held at arm's length. The astronauts will take turns peering through Orion's windows with cameras. If the lighting is right, they should see features never before viewed through human eyes. They'll also catch snippets of a total solar eclipse, donning eclipse glasses as the moon briefly blocks the sun from their perspective and the corona is revealed. All of NASA's moon plans, a surge in launches over the next several years leading to a sustainable moon base for astronauts assisted by robotic rovers and drones, hinge on Artemis II going well. It's been more than 3 years since Artemis I, the only other time NASA's SLS rocket and Orion capsules have soared. With no one aboard, the Artemis I capsule lacked the life support equipment and other crew essentials like a water dispenser and a toilet. During a weekend news conference, Cook stressed how humanity's path to Mars goes through the moon, the proving ground for points beyond. It is our strong hope that this mission is the start of an era where every person on Earth can look at the moon and think of it as also a destination. Added Glover, it's the story of humanity, not black history, not women's history, but it becomes human history. Well, we're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and it's time to turn to the editorial page at 17 minutes past the hour. We have a three-parter, as we typically do of Fridays, it seems. Important efforts reach across borders, reduce loneliness, and foster startups. We're growing accustomed to what used to be an unusual situation, angry Canadians. To be clear, that anger is aimed at the United States because the president has antagonized our northern neighbors by erratically imposing tariffs and calling their homeland the 51st state. But an article by the News' Matt Glynn proves that when it comes to business, disagreements can be overcome. As Glynn wrote, Jim Y. found himself at a crossroads because he had a major customer who insisted he move his plastic injection molding company to the United States from Canada. Y complied and relocated Avanti and Advanced Manufacturing to Buffalo from Waterloo, Ontario. Y kept that customer and discovered the advantages of operating on this side of the border, lower real estate costs, and skilled workers in the Buffalo area with lower labor costs than Southern Ontario. Y's company isn't the only one finding it hospitable just south of the border. In the first 4 months of 2025, Invest Buffalo Niagara had as much Canadian activity as the organization would normally see in 12 months, said Matthew Hubacher, the organization's senior vice president. That includes companies like Worksport, which moved its manufacturing operations and headquarters to West Seneca from Ontario a few years ago, Electrovia, a maker of lithium-ion batteries based in Mississauga, Ontario, is opening a cell manufacturing plant near Jamestown in Chautauqua County. And then there are Canada-based companies such as Moleculite and Agriplastics, which are investing in Western New York-based operations. To our northern neighbors, we say welcome.
Some shared companionship. Writing for The Bright Side, Samantha Chrisman told an uplifting story about Jonathan Lacey, who took the advice of a friend and contacted Compeer. Compeer is a Kavanaugh Avenue organization that matches volunteers like Lacey with people in the community whose mental health would benefit from companionship. Matches spend about an hour a week together, in person or on the phone. Lacey's match with Jalen Wright, a junior from South Buffalo, proved it both beneficial for both. Lacey had been working from home. Besides talking to his wife, would go weeks without talking to someone. That changed when he met his Compeer match. Compeer's activities include everything from nature walks to free community game nights, helping volunteers and community members finding common ground and friendship. Other organizations highlighted included Feed More Western New York Home Delivered Meals, call 716-822-2002, and Western New York Independent Living, call 1-800-348-8399, which I believe is our parent organization now. Resources for loneliness relief are available. And then a startup showdown. The 43 North Business Plan competition has been joined by other innovative startup catalysts like the 26th annual Henry A. Panoski Jr. Technology Entrepreneurship Competition. As reported by the News' Mike Petro, 5 finalists will be selected from a pool of students who are connected to the University at Buffalo. The students are competing for more than $75,000 in funding and services. At 53, there is no shortage of applications. Preliminary judges pared down the teams to 13 semifinalists, most focused on tech products and services. Finalists will deliver long-form presentations to judges on April 15th and then 5-minute pitches, 43 North style, the following day from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. at UB Center for the Arts. Competition will be fierce for the first place prize of $65,000 in startup funding and business services to the group that presents the best plan for a viable new business in Western New York. The second place team will receive $10,000 in seed funding. And this year, there's a new $5,000 prize sponsored by the UB Office of Business and Entrepreneur Partnerships. Competitions that spur business growth in Western New York are contributing to the long history of entrepreneurship and invention. It's something to celebrate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, in the editorial cartoons, Adam Ziglis has one today called The Shell Game.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. It has a caricature of President Trump sitting behind a table with 3 helmets masquerading as shells. And the table is labeled Find the Hidden War Rationale. And these helmets are all labeled USA. So why are we at war with Iran? And then in the background it shows how these oil companies, Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, that's the idea of the Shell Game, kind of double meaning thing there. Cute. And Michael Ramirez, another familiar name from the Creators Syndicate, shows Lucy sitting behind her psychiatrist's desk. Psychiatric help, $19,000. A little bit bigger than her usual fee. The doctor is in, and it says an AOC supporter special. Campaign funds accepted here. Mm-hmm. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, Lucy of famed Peanuts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From Daniel D. Petrus, Trump's gut instincts regarding Iran have long been a failure. President Trump once remarked that his intuition and instincts were the key factors separating him from the mere mortals trying to negotiate good deals. Oh boy. I have a gut, and my gut tells me sometimes more than anyone else's brain can ever tell me, the president said at one point during his first term. Okay, no editorializing. And in many cases, Trump's words have proven to be prophetic. Prioritizing his gut over the traditional advice of his political advisors have earned him 2 presidential election victories and a core base of support that sticks with him, regardless of what decisions he makes. Yet on par, peace and Iran, the insightful gut Trump claims to possess, is looking more and more like a cesspool of adolescent-level judgment. The president and his allies will continue to give interviews about how wonderful the military operation against Iran is going and how Tehran, humbled and confused, is either on its last legs or desperate to make an agreement to save itself. Yet we shouldn't fall for public relations strategy. The United States is in the position it's in today because Trump's predilections on Iran have failed consistently since his first term. Every assumption he's carried has been dead wrong on every level. The list is far too long to extrapolate on comprehensively in a single column, but consider this.
In May 2018, after campaigning in part on how horrible the Barack Obama-era Iranian nuclear deal was, Trump issued an executive order to officially pull the United States out of the accord and reinstate all of the economic sanctions previously lifted on the Iranian economy. The aim, he said at the time, was to pressure the Iranians so hard that they would be forced to crawl back to the negotiating table and settle on a new deal with tougher terms. In Trump's own words, the fact is the Iranians are going to want to make a new and lasting deal, one that benefits all of Iran and the Iranian people. How did that assumption work out? Not very well. Iran took the U.S. withdrawal as an insulting breach of an agreement it negotiated only a few years prior. Even as Iran's banking channels were isolated from the international financial system and more Iranian oil barrels came off the market, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei refused to authorize a renegotiation with Washington. Instead of caving as Trump expected, Iran acquired leverage of its own by installing more centrifuges, churning out uranium at higher grades, and increasing its stockpile of nuclear fuel. The decision to leave the old nuclear deal simply added to Trump's problems. Those faulty assumptions have continued to the present day. During the opening hours of the war, Trump, convinced by Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that killing Khamenei would cause chaos in the Iranian ranks, targeted the Supreme Leader's office partly in the hope that the regime itself would be decapitated. Khamenei and some of his closest longtime advisors were killed during the first day of the conflict, which was no doubt a stellar military success on the tactical level. However, the weakening of the Iranian regime that Trump and Netanyahu were betting on missed the mark. There were no mass demonstrations by the Iranian people against the regime. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps continued to fight even more ferociously, and Khamenei's death did nothing to bring Iranians' negotiating position into a more reasonable plane. Trump thought he could rerun the playbook in Venezuela, where taking out a dictator at the top level would lead to a more pragmatic replacement. Nothing like that has occurred. The Strait of Hormuz, the Middle East's most important choke point for oil, natural gas, and other exports, is the site of another Trump miscalculation. Despite being warned that Iran could shut the waterway during any prospective war with the United States, the president apparently believed Tehran would capitulate before that scenario happened. Why he was so confident things would shake out as he predicted was a mystery.
Of course, we know how the story has proceeded. The Strait of Hormuz, through which about 1/5 of the world's crude oil flows to market, is now essentially an Iranian-controlled lake. Shipping traffic has been declined by an astounding 95% from pre-war levels, increasing the price of crude by more than over half in the last month and forcing the Trump administration to relax sanctions on Iranian crude to ensure adequate global supply. The Economist magazine found that Iran is now earning twice as much from its own oil sales as it did before the U.S. and Israeli bombs started falling, a direct consequence of Tehran's decision to turn maritime traffic in the Persian Gulf on and off virtually at will. Finally, Trump continues to assume that if he drops enough bombs on enough Iranian targets, kills enough senior-level Iranian officials, and allows enough rhetorical threats on Truth Social, the latest being a post on Monday threatening to wipe out Iran's electricity infrastructure, Iran will capitulate out of fear. Yet, we should keep in mind that the U.S. has already bombed Iran more than 10,000 times over the last month, and when you add Israel's strikes to the equation, the number goes up even further. Even so, Iran is determined to continue stringing out the war for as long as it takes to get Trump to quit out of economic desperation. Iran's strategy could, very well work. After all, the last thing Trump needs is even higher gas prices and inflation at a time when the midterm elections will hinge on which party is doing a better job of tackling cost of living issues. Being a leader sometimes means having the humility to admit when your previous belief system was incorrect. The other path is to pressing on in your delusions, hoping you will eventually be vindicated. Well, we see how that's working out.
Hey, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. At 30 minutes past the hour, we turn to the local editorial writers. This one, in my view, comes from Karen Marshall. Her devotion to the Sabres has been lifelong. I've been a Buffalo Sabres fan for as long as I can remember. I grew up in the glory days of the French Connection line, Gilbert Perrault, Rick Martin, and René Robert, and the classic blue and gold jerseys. It was not groovy for a 4-year-old girl growing up in the 70s to know the Sabres roster, stats, standings, and all about the game of hockey, but I loved the game and I loved my Sabres. I have joyous childhood memories of watching games. It was a family event. Friday nights were the best. I was able to stay up late, eat pizza, and watch the game. We'd gather around the kitchen table with a black and white TV while repeatedly adjusting the antenna for the best picture. Helmets weren't required, and the glass on the boards was so short, except behind the net, it was barely enough to protect the crowd. I remember watching intently and occasionally losing the puck in the thick fog that hovered over the ice. These are my earliest and best memories. My first time seeing the Sabres live was at an open practice at Memorial Auditorium. I remember going up into the orange seats, affectionately known as the nosebleeds, walking for what seemed like forever through the winding ramp corridors just to see what it looked like from up there. It felt like you could touch the rafters. The upper levels were so steep they would scare some adults, let alone a small child, but you could see it all from up there, and I took it all in. To this day, when I go to the games, I prefer sitting higher up in the stands because from there you have an amazing bird's eye view of the action. Goals, benches, blue line, all of it. Yeah, except from up that high, it's hard to see the puck. Oh, well.
Yeah.
I watched as the jersey colors and the team logo changed, and some brief changes, thankfully, were brief. I never got used to the slug. I watched my favorite players' jerseys get moved to the rafters as they were traded or retired. Now that I'm growing up, I catch a live game whenever I can. I love going to the home opener to experience the excitement and anticipation of what the new season and new players will bring. I've traveled to games in Tampa, Florida, Pittsburgh, and even Las Vegas to see them play the Golden Knights when they were first introduced to the league. It was awesome. So many fans were there, and the energy was electric. It was a good game. It got tied up with seconds to go, but ultimately ended in defeat. But when I traveled to Pittsburgh, the Sabres won by a landslide. I'm looking forward to more away games. It seems like wherever you go, there's a loyal group of out-of-town Sabres fans. My love for the Sabres, as for most teams, has been a roller coaster ride. They have definitely tried my loyalty and devotion. However, I am not a fair-weather fan. I stood beside my team during the good and bad, the glory years, the playoffs, the lack of playoffs, and the heartbreaking no goal. When everybody else was giving up on them, I was the one saying, next season will be better. I look forward to every season with sweet anticipation and optimism. This season has been amazing, and I am looking forward to the end of a playoff drought along with every Buffalonian. Buffalo is and will always be a hockey town, and I will always be a Sabres fan.
I don't get that bit with a 4-year-old not being groovy for watching the Sabres. I remember those days, and everybody watched the Sabres. Everybody knew the French Connection.
Everybody.
They must be talking about somebody else.
I guess.
Well, from another voice, the NFTA, state must invest in upstate public transportation. This is from Assemblymember Karen McMahon, who represents District 146, and Assemblymember Jonathan Rivera, who represents District 149. This article is from Karen McMahon and John Rivera. During the escalating conflict with Iran, global oil markets are increasingly volatile, resulting in higher prices at the pump. Boy, do I know that. Combined with the increased cost of housing, groceries, and utilities, New Yorkers are looking to cut costs and need affordable transportation options. As Western New York legislators, we are advocating for the state to fully fund the Niagara Frontier Transit Authority, or the NFTA, by providing a 15% increase in state transit operating assistance to upstate or non-MTA transit systems. Bus riders in our districts have told of declining frequency of service in important routes that have been eliminated in recent years. This is especially concerning because 30% of Buffalo residents do not own a car and rely on public transportation. In addition, 49% of available job opportunities are inaccessible via mass transit. As one of the most segregated cities in the country, Black and brown Buffalo residents have long suffered the impacts of redlining, unequal access to employment opportunities, and environmental racism. The unavailability of robust public transit options contributes to this inequality. Furthermore, the cost of owning a car is becoming increasingly prohibitive, with those costs having increased more than 40% since January of 2020. As a result, more middle to lower income Americans are falling behind on their car payments. Every household can benefit from improved access to public transit, even those residents who own cars. If New York drivers could shift even 1 in 5 trips to an alternative mode of transportation, households would save on average over $2,000 a year. If a household could downsize from 2 cars to 1, those savings would balloon to $12,000 per household per year. A recent report by American Public Transit Association shows that investing in transit produces 5 times the economic output over the long run. Keeping transit service fast and frequent allows our labor forces to affordably get around, which saves households money. New York State must do right by upstate transit authorities and help the NFTA maintain and improve service. Let's fully fund upstate transit and ensure fast and frequent transportation options for Western New York residents. To which I say amen.
Really a coincidence that our turn to the financial pages takes us to an article from Associated Press writer Hannah Fingerhut. Gas stations have little control on spiking costs. The near daily changes in U.S. gas prices are dizzying for drivers who are left feeling frustrated and cash-strapped by the highest fuel costs since 2022. With the Iran war pushing up prices worldwide, the U.S. average for a gallon of gas topped $4 on Tuesday and now stands at $4.01, according to AAA. In the Buffalo Niagara region, the average price has reached nearly $3.97 a gallon. Prices can change from one day to the next or from one nearby station to another, forcing drivers to game out the right moment to fill up or hunt for cheaper prices. Experts say differences in price aren't typically decided by any individual gas retailer, and most of them aren't pocketing the extra pennies when prices rise. The uncertainty at the pump is trickling down from a massive, volatile oil and gas market that's making it hard for gas stations to keep up. Lonnie McWhorter, Director of Operations at 36 Lynn Refuel Station in Minneapolis, said his margins have gotten much tighter. The neighborhood convenience store posted $3.99 a gallon. $3, really could call it $3.40.
Yeah.
For regular gas on Wednesday, which is about 18 cents lower than the metro average, according to AAA. We price based on what we're able to buy fuel at and how well we can operate, McWhorter said. Wholesale fuel prices, which shift multiple times a day, are the main reason McWhorter said he's charging more than a month ago. He's also facing higher credit card fees and rising costs to maintain pumps. At times like these, with consumers screaming for help, McWhorter said small operators like him act more on emotion than greed. We're in our stores every day looking our customers in the eye, he said. It really takes a toll when people are having to cut back on certain things in order to afford to live. A lot of it is outside the gas retailer's control. Roughly half the price at the pump pays for the cost of crude oil, the main ingredient in gasoline, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. About 20% goes to refiners who turn crude into gas. These costs have risen as crude oil prices jumped in response to the war and shipping disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Gas retailers are adjusting the price at the pump to account for the higher price that they just paid for their next shipment of gasoline. Taxes, federal, state, and local, account for nearly 20% of the price, while about 10% is left for retailers who still have to pay for transportation, labor, and other expenses. Retailers' markup has averaged about 38 cents a gallon over the past 5 years, according to the convenience store trade group NACS, citing data from research firm Opus. After expenses, stations may keep roughly 15 cents per gallon, said Jeff Leonard, a vice president at NACS. Some make more, some make less, he said. Patrick Lehan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, compared it to a homeowner's role in setting their sale price. If I was selling a house today, I'd be beholden to whatever the housing market is, DeHaan said. That's the same for gas station owners. Whatever the price of oil and gasoline are, they are a price taker, not maker. Although the national average just passed $4 a gallon, the price that drivers pay varies widely by state, city, and station. Taxes alone can create large gaps. California's gas taxes and fees total about 71 cents a gallon last year, compared with roughly 9 cents in Alaska and about 24 cents in New York. Distance from refineries, the type of retailer, how much volume the location goes through, and whether there are other fuel options nearby also play a role.
Yeah, they got a photo on that with the Chevron station in Los Angeles, $8.29 a gallon. And that's for gas, and it's $8.89 for diesel. How do you even afford anything?
I have no idea.
Sheesh. Well, from Matt Glynn, manufacturing. NYPA backs WavePoint and NeoFab projects. WavePoint, 3PL, and NeoFab Robotics have received support from the New York Power Authority, or NYPA, for their planned new facilities. WavePoint is acquiring and redeveloping certain Teads former plant in Buffalo Lakeside Commerce Park, turning it into a warehouse. The project is estimated at $25 million, and WavePoint has pledged to create 55 jobs. The Power Authority is providing a $1.5 million allocation of Western New York Power proceed funds, which comes from the sale of unused hydropower generated at Niagara Power Project in Lewiston. WavePoint, which paid $21 million for the building at 231 Ship Canal Parkway, plans to spend $4 million on renovations and new equipment to modernize the South Buffalo facility, upgrade the loading docks, and install advanced warehouse and logistics management systems. It received $317,500 in sales and mortgage recording tax breaks from the Erie County Industrial Development Agency for that purchase. NeoFab specializes in robotic assisted fabrication, welding, tube and pipe processing, and precision industrial manufacturing. The company's project is valued at $3.9 million, and NeoFab has pledged to create 23 jobs. The Power Authority also awarded 510 kilowatts of low-cost power to support NeoFab's project, less than 800 kilowatts requested by the company. The Niagara County Industrial Development Agency in February approved $776,067 in tax break for the company that is being launched by Veronica and Dwayne Duncan of Niagara Industrial Mechanical Services. The company plans a 24,000 square foot production facility on 4-acre property in Sanborn in the Vantage Industrial Park. Preservation Buffalo was awarded $409,906 in NYPA funding to support its rehabilitation of the Eliza Quirk House, a pre-Civil War historic structure in Buffalo. The Eliza Quirk House was saved from demolition in 2017 and has since been designated as a local landmark and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The building is slated to become Preservation Buffalo Niagara's headquarters. The building will also serve as a hub for tours and workshops for the surrounding community and will be open as office space for other nonprofits. Empire State Development previously awarded the group $359,000 in funding for that project. So.
Well, as part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. Just 3 death listings today and no major obituaries. So here they are. Fulton Sears, Cheryl. Let's see. She would have been 78, sorry. She was from Ransomville. Goodwin, Mary T. Nee Donovan, 78-year-old, or 68-year-old from Hamburg. And Harvey, Carol Ann Nee Leone. Let's see, 85-year-old from Tonawanda. Beloved wife of 62 years to Dick Harvey. Well, that's the listings. Again, if you have any questions about any of those names, give us a call at 716-821-5555.
And now for a little bit of entertainment of Royal Stars from Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Friday, April 3rd of 2026. You are energetic and charismatic. You have strong views. You are also persuasive and perceptive. This year you will reap rewards of your past efforts. And the stars today, there's 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult, and mostly everybody's kind of average. Aries is 3 stars, TGIF. We're thankful to get here. However, this day has its challenges, and it's a poor day for important discussions about financial matters, and tonight, check your finances. Taurus is 3 stars. Life is a bit confusing today because you're very determined about something, dare we say, obsessed. We did. And obsessive thinking can obscure your ability to see the big picture. Tonight, listen and cooperate. Gemini is also 3 stars. Today you might be excited about a secret love affair or some kind of secret pleasure that few people know about. Tonight, work and get organized. Gee, while you're obsessing about romance? Okay, Cancer, also 3 stars. Relations with a friend or group might be emotional today. You might have to confront someone. Ironically, you might even have to confront yourself. Tonight, socialize. Leo, 2 stars. Tread carefully today because you might bump heads with parents, bosses, teachers, VIPs, and the police. You have strong feelings about something today. Tonight, relax at home. I think I'm glad I'm not a Leo. Virgo, 3 stars. Steer clear of arguments today and resist the urge to make someone agree with your way of thinking. This is not your best choice tonight. Important conversations. Libras, 3 stars. A lot of 3 stars today. Your best option today is to work alone because everyone has a strong opinion and point of view, especially about financial matters. Tonight, take care of your possessions. Scorpio, 2 stars. You have strong opinions and feelings today, and you might make your case. However, you are best served by working alone and setting aside some time for some friendly, easygoing socializing, romantically or with your kids or related to sports. Tonight, you win. Sagittarius, more 3 stars. Do your best to be patient and diplomatic with coworkers today as well as care workers. Because it's easy to get into a power struggle with someone, tonight, enjoy privacy. Capricorn, 3 stars. Avoid dicey communications with romantic partners today. Likewise, parents should take it easy when dealing with your kids. Resist making things a black or white issue. Tonight, be friendly. That scares me when they got to remind you to be friendly. Aquarius is 2 stars. Emotions are running high today because people are opinionated and stubborn. You know who you are. Tonight, you're noticed. And Pisces, also 3 stars. A lot of those today. You're pumped with energy because fiery Mars is in your sign. You're also ready to speak because Mercury is in your sign. However, everyone is highly opinionated today, including you. Tonight, explore. Well, that was fun. I think I'm going to go home and hide. Well, let's see. Today in history. In 1860, the first Pony Express mail delivery rides began, one heading west from St. Joseph, Missouri, and one heading east from Sacramento, California. In 1882, outlaw Jesse James was shot and killed in St. Joseph, Missouri by Robert Ford, a member of the James Gang. Well, gee, that's the second thing with St. Joseph of Missouri. Don't go there. 1836, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was electrocuted in Trenton, New Jersey for the 1932 kidnapped murder of 20-month-old Charles Lindbergh Jr. 1968, Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. delivered was to be his final speech, telling a rally of striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, "I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." The following day, King was killed at Lorraine Motel in Memphis. In 1996, Theodore Kaczynski, the Harvard-educated mathematician known as the Unabomber, was arrested at a remote Montana cabin by FBI agents. From his off-the-grid location, Kaczynski waged a 17-year bombing campaign that killed 3 and injured 23. He died in prison in 2023 at age 81, and finally in 2009, a gunman opened fire on a room where immigrants were taking U.S. citizen exam in Binghamton, New York, killing 13 people before taking his own life. Well,
we've got some time left for a look back at the financial pages. Declining egg prices help buyers but hurt farmers. This is from Associated Press writer Deanne Durbin. U.S. egg prices have fallen 60% from last year's record highs, making it easier for consumers to fill their Easter baskets and Passover Seder plates. Bird flu is to blame for elevated retail prices during the first 5 months of 2025. And the course of the highly contagious disease is a big reason why prices are much lower now. An outbreak forced farmers and commercial producers to slaughter entire broods of egg-laying hens. But ebbing cases in the second half of last year helped restore egg supplies, said Mark Jordan, the executive director of agricultural research firm Leap Market Analytics. The stubborn outbreak is still affecting poultry flocks, with the number of infected commercial flocks rising in March, but farmers have been rapidly replenishing flocks that died or had to be destroyed. Between July 2024 and July 25, the number of egg-type chicks hatched in the U.S. rose 8%. It was the first sustained and substantial increase in the availability of specially bred layer chicks since the bird flu outbreak began in 2022, Jordan said. The Trump administration's decision to import nearly 1 billion eggs last year also helped lower prices, Jordan said, although imports have since returned to more normal levels. The U.S. also exported fewer eggs last year to help boost domestic supplies. I don't know how you balance importing eggs and exporting eggs. Somebody does it.
Yeah.
But what's good for consumers isn't necessarily good for farmers who are finding it difficult to recoup their costs as egg prices plummet. They also may have had to pay more for feed, including corn and soybean meal, because of the Iran war. Farmers are no strangers to volatility. It's part of the business. But in recent months, many have been selling eggs at or below the cost of production, said Emily Matz, president and CEO of the American Egg Board. Here's a look at egg prices by the numbers, according to government figures. This is average price for a dozen eggs in February, $2.50 a dozen. Average price for a dozen eggs in March 2025, $6.23 per dozen. That's an all-time high. Number of egg-laying hens as of March 1st, 315.8 million. That's 8% higher than last year. Number of chickens and other birds in commercial and backyard flocks that died or were culled due to bird flu since February 2022, 205.7 million.
Wow.
Number of chickens and other birds that died or were culled because of bird flu in March, 5.22 million. That's more than double the number affected in March a year ago. 657% is the percentage increase in U.S. imports of shell eggs in 2025 compared with the year before. And the average cost for farmers to produce a dozen eggs, not including labor and transportation, $1.05. In late March, the national average wholesale price of eggs was $1.17 a dozen. So if you're charging, if you're spending $1.05 to produce the eggs, you can only get $1.17 a dozen. It doesn't give you much profit, does it?
Not really. Well, we have a page on the front page, a story that
I was just going to say, let's read that. So
let's read that.
We're on the same page. I love it.
This made every single news headline yesterday. The BBC reported it.
Good old BBC.
It is a girl for Josh and Haley, and this is from Catherine Fitzgerald. Josh Allen is officially a girl dad. The Buffalo Bills quarterback and his wife, singer-actress Haley Steinfeld, have welcomed a baby girl. Steinfeld made the announcement in her newsletter, Bow Society, which she also used to announce last year that the couple were expecting. The announcement was short, stating Thursday morning the baby had arrived with a quick note and a cartoon of a girl being carried by a stork. The couple did not reveal the baby's name, much less her weight, length, or place of birth. We're feeling incredibly grateful and blessed and savoring these early moments. Thank you so much for the love and well wishes, the Post said. Alan and Steinfeld wed in May of 2025 in California. They had gone public with their relationship in the spring of 2023. Steinfeld most recently starred in the blockbuster movie Sinners, was unable to attend the Oscars because she was expecting. Steinfeld herself was not nominated, but the picture received a record 16 nominations and had 4 wins. When the couple announced the pregnancy in December, Alan said that he was excited for the outpouring of support. I've known for a long time, so it's not that crazy for me, Alan said. But yeah, obviously the love I've received from teammates and friends, it's really cool. It's a special moment in my life and my wife's life. Alan is the latest in a group of Bills members to have had a girl. Tight end Dawson Knox, wide receiver Khalil Shakir, linebacker Terrell Bernard, and even coach Joe Brady all had girls in the last year. Wow. While Allen has generally been quiet around his personal life, his left tackle Deion Dawkins said in December of 2024 that Steinfeld was making Allen better on and off the field. He's having fun because everything around him is right, Dawkins said. Well, yeah, I kind of noticed that no details other than it was a girl.
Yeah,
he likes his privacy, and I respect that. I could just imagine 2 million people standing around wherever that baby was born.
Indeed.
Give him a break.
I found an interesting little article in the middle of the front section. This is the Associated Press reporting from Rome. Pope Leo XIV washed the feet of 12 priests in the traditional Holy Thursday ritual. That was yesterday evening, restoring a tradition his predecessor had broken by including lay people and non-Christians in ceremonies at prisons, juvenile detention halls, and centers for asylum seekers. The priests included 11 ordained by Leo last year, along with the Reverend Renzo Chiesa, the director of the Rome Diocese's primary seminary. Leo poured water from a golden pitcher over the priest's feet before drying them with a white cloth and bestowing a kiss in what the pontiff in his homily called a gratuitous and humble gesture that demonstrates the true omnipotence of God. Indeed, through this act, Jesus purifies not only our image of God from the idolatry and blasphemy that have distorted it, but also our image of humanity, Leo said in his homily inside the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran, the official ecclesiastical seat of the Pope as the Bishop of Rome. For we tend to consider ourselves powerful when we dominate, victorious when we destroy our equals, great when we are feared, said the pontiff, who has been outspoken against war. In contrast, as true God and true man, Christ offers us the example of self-giving, service, and love. The Holy Thursday foot washing ceremony is a hallmark of every Holy Week and recalls the foot washing Jesus performed on his 12 apostles at the Last Supper together before he was crucified. Francis revolutionized the ritual for the Vatican by insisting from his first Holy Thursday as Pope in 2013 that it include women and people of other faiths among the 12. Previously, popes performed the ritual on Catholic men only at the Rome Basilica. Leo's decision to restore the prominent place of priests during the ritual is both a return to tradition and a gesture consistent with what seems to be his effort to encourage Catholic clergy and reinforce his appreciation of their service. Well, longtime listeners have heard me mention this before. I get here about 8 o'clock every Friday morning to fill in the template for our reading and try and find articles that will fit the template and provide enough time to read them. And every once in a while, we have time to fill in with articles like the one about Josh's little girl. So here we are. You're listening to a reading of articles in the Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio's reading service. It's Friday, April 3rd. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers are
J.J. Patek
and Don Williams.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Don Williams.
J.J. Patek, and we move on to city and region. And court ruling spurs Amherst to review its term limits law, from Stephen Watson. The town of Amherst has term limits for most of the elected officials for the past 2 decades. The now town leaders wonder whether the rule would hold up to a legal challenge. That's why the town is researching whether Amherst voted need to approve a term limits law for it to be legally valid. It just felt like right now, this year, we don't have any town offices up for election, so this would be the best time to really look at it. No one has skin in this game, and make sure we are in compliance, Deputy Supervisor Angelo Marinucci said. The state appeals court ruling overturned a term limits law that was approved by the town board, but not voters in Clarkstown in the Hudson Valley. The decision raised questions about the legality of term limits in other communities like Amherst, where town boards or city councils had approved the measures. While several Amherst officials have abided by the term limits law in the 3 years since Clarkstown ruling, the town board in March set up a committee to study the issue. Marinucci and other officials say they're not trying to wriggle out of term limits. Instead, they want to make sure the town has a law that withstands legal scrutiny. One attorney with extensive experience in election and municipal legal matters said this is prudent because as it stands now, Amherst rule is vulnerable to a lawsuit from a town elected official. There's a high degree of likelihood that the town of Amherst term limits local law is not valid and not enforceable because no referendum was ever held, said Craig R. Bookie, a partner with Phillips Little. At least a half a dozen communities in Erie County have put term limits in place, some by referendum, but others by board or council vote only over the last several decades. The laws vary based on which offices are subject to term limits and how many terms officials may serve before they're barred from seeking re-election. The limits are a rule that do not apply to town justices or city judges. Grand Island and West Seneca approved term limits laws and public votes in 2024. In both cases, towns were updating laws already on their books, and Lackawanna has had limits of 2 consecutive 4-year terms for mayor and city council members ever since city voters approved them in the 1990s, spokesperson Chuck Clark said. Other communities, however, passed their laws through legislative action. Evans Town Board in 2011 approved term limits for town supervisor and board members who can't serve more than 2 consecutive terms of 4 years each. It is the intent of the town board of the town of Evans to expand participation in the electoral process and bring new ideas to the governance of the town of Evans, the law state. The Tonawanda Town Board in 2006 approved limits of 3 terms for town supervisor and town board following the election of the previous fall of the first Democratic town board majority in a century. That was also the year the Amherst Town Board approved term limits for supervisor, board members, town clerk, and highway superintendent. Amherst then town attorney noted state law at the time didn't require voters to approve this kind of local law. The Clarkstown term limits law was challenged by that town supervisor who was in his 8th year in the job but wanted to run for another term. The Clarkstown Town Board had approved limits of 2 4-year terms for town supervisor and board members. Supervisor George Holman argued that under the state's municipal home rule law, any local law that reduces the power of an elected official or gets rid of a local elected official requires approval by voters in a binding referendum before it takes effect. The case made its way to the State Court of Appeals, New York's highest court, which in 2023 ruled in Holman's favor. In Amherst, Deborah Bookey had already opted not to seek re-election to the town board in 2023 when the appeals court decision came out that year, said Craig Bookey, her son. She was finishing up the second term of her most recent 2 terms on the town board, a tenure that followed prior stints as town clerk, as a town board member. She's happy to allow others to serve in the elective office, Craig Bookey said, while she dotes on her grandchildren now. In 2025, Amherst Supervisor Brian Colpin, board member Jacqueline Berger did not challenge the town's term limits law, stepping down after 2 consecutive terms in their respective posts. And Sean Levine gave up his town board seat to run for supervisor. However, Marinucci said she's pushing for answers about the town term limit law because some Amherst residents have questioned its validity. She said she also wanted to know whether the state's new law changing most municipal elections to even years affects Amherst term limits law. The officials elected in the town last fall, for example, will serve a 3-year term initially, as will those elected in 2027. Marinucci said she consulted with town attorney Steve Bengert and ultimately thought it made sense for a panel of town residents to study the issue and make recommendations to the town board. The town board last year voted to establish a committee and is seeking volunteers to serve on the body. The board must act by August in order to set the question on November's ballot, Marinucci said. If you're asking me right now, my anticipation is that we will be putting on the ballot this November pretty much as is, and that'll be it and it'll be done, she said. Marinucci and Levine, who won last year's contest for Amherst supervisor, said their goal was to have legally viable term limits in Amherst. We want absolute clarity, Levine said. Tonawanda town officials, for their part, say they believe their law would stand up to a lawsuit. Town attorney Michael Cushion pointed out to another part of the Clarkstown law, which stated the town's term limits only could be repealed by a supermajority of that town board. Tonawanda's law does not have that provision, Cushion said. That's the distinction, that supermajority vote. Basically, we elect our town council, our legislators, to rule by majority vote. So when you add that supermajority requirement, you're limiting their authority. Only the voters can do that, he said. Joseph Eminger said he won't seek a 4th term as town supervisor in 2027 because he believes Tonawanda's term limits remain in effect. Now, if for some reason it's found that we have interpreted incorrectly, trust me when I say we will have it as a referendum as soon as possible, said Eminger, who voted for the law as a new board member in 2006, but I don't see that happening because I believe we did it correctly. Bookey noted that the courts overturned the Clarkstown law both because of its supermajority provision and because it limited the ability of voters to elect their representatives. Either reason afforded an independent basis for doing so, Bookey said. For that reason, I still see a high likelihood of validation of Amherst term limits local law if it were to be challenged in court. However, Paul Wolf, an attorney and former longtime president of the New York Coalition for Open Government, said he believes Amherst law would withstand a lawsuit. He agreed with Cushion's interpretation of the Clarkstown case and pointed to other rulings going back decades that upheld term limit laws passed by board or council vote. Wolf, in a memo to Amherst town officials, objected to the creation of the Term Limits Commission and questioned the motives of those who pushed for its establishment. It appears that some town board members who will soon be subject to term limits are using the Court of Appeals decision as a pretext to eliminate or extend the current 8-year limit, Wolf wrote. Well, that ought to be fun.
Well, I found it interesting. The town of Evans representative said that one of the purposes is to bring new ideas to the governance of the town. That is precisely why a lot of financial benefactors of groups like Shakespeare and Delaware Park want to see term limits for the board of directors for those organizations, because they want to see not stagnant leadership but fresh ideas, which is why I voted in favor of term limits for board members when I was on the Shakespeare board some years back. It got me kicked off the board. Well, I had already surpassed those limits. And as it turns out, we had to write a donation of a certain minimum size to be on the board, and I continue to make that same donation, but I no longer have to go to the boring board meetings. It's a win-win.
I know.
Well, and
Board meetings, I hate them.
I just don't like meetings in general. And another legal interesting case, I guess Aaron Bessinger reports, Karen Fleming spent about 2 years behind bars awaiting trial for a triple shooting on Hurdle Avenue in January 2024. Yesterday, an Erie County judge dismissed the charges against him, ruling that prosecutors didn't follow speedy trial rules and failed to turn over evidence to Fleming's defense attorneys in a timely fashion. That included some evidence disclosed within a week of Fleming's previous trial date in January of this year. The discovery abuses by the originating assistant district attorney, coupled with the deficiencies by the Buffalo police, make this a travesty, and my client spent all that time in jail, said defense attorney Robert Steinhaus. Justice has now been served. County Judge Kenneth Case dismissed charges of attempted murder, assault, and weapons possession for the shooting inside Sahara Hookah Lounge on Hurdle between Delaware and Colvin Avenues on January 6, 2024. 3 men were injured in the shooting. Prosecutors previously said Fleming was in a group with Buffalo Bills defensive end Shaq Lawson at the lounge that night. The district attorney's office is considering its legal options and may take the case to the Appellate Division, 4th Department. Our office is reviewing the court's decision and motion arguments to evaluate the legal basis for the dismissal of the indictment to determine if an appeal should be followed with the 4th Department, spokeswoman Caitlin Monroe said in an email. Fleming, 32, could have faced up to 25 years in prison if convicted. I think my decision speaks for itself, and I'll leave it at that, the judge said in court after granting the dismissal. Case issued an 8-page written decision in which he ruled the delays caused by the failure of the district attorney's office to meet the requirements of the evidence-sharing process known as discovery. The judge found prosecutors failed to meet their burden, showing that they did, in fact, failed to meet their burden, showing that they did, in fact, exercise due diligence and make reasonable inquiries of Buffalo Police and the Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory. Prosecutors first informed the court they were ready for trial on June 11, 2024. It is undisputed that several discoverable items, all generated prior to that date, were not disclosed by the people for over a year, and in some cases 2 years after the Declaration of Readiness, Case wrote in his decision. Those included 2 forensic reports from the county crime lab analyzing fired casings recovered from the scene. The people first learned of these reports in December 2025 after previously telling the defendant's counsel no lab testing was completed, the judge wrote. The attorneys got them 2 weeks before the scheduled start of trial. Prosecutors previously said in court they were unaware Buffalo Police requested the forensic analyses. Prosecutors also admitted in October they had only then completed a full review of the Buffalo Police Department file for the case, according to Case's ruling. That's despite prosecutors finding a previously undisclosed Buffalo Police report in the case 2 months earlier. Other items belatedly turned over to defense attorneys included text messages between one of the victims and DA office staff and a report about a police interview of one of the victims on the day of the shooting, the judge said in his ruling. Just a few days before the scheduled trial, prosecutors turned over a text message from a victim that identified a potential shooter other than Fleming. The judge noted that none of the attorneys handling the case at present were on the case when the people declared ready for trial in June 2024. Fleming, who had been incarcerated since his arrest, days after the shooting, until early February when the judge set bail, had been scheduled to go to trial on January 5th. The evidence they failed to turn over was not trivial, defense attorney James Maloney said. It included exculpatory evidence, firearms analysis reports, additional witnesses, and text messages between the victim and the former prosecutor. All evidence that should have been turned over at the start of the case, not on the eve of the trial. Fleming had planned to take the stand at his trial and argue he acted in self-defense because he was being robbed, his defense attorneys have said. My life was on the line, and God got me through it to make it home to my beautiful children, Fleming said outside the courtroom on yesterday. He thanked the attorneys and the judge. A spokesperson for Mayor Sean Ryan's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
Well,
I don't think that case will be coming back, but we'll see.
we'll see what happens. Well, from Justin Sondel, judge dismisses suit against city over Marina Pact. A legal ruling is putting the future of Erie Basin Marina into clearer focus. A judge has tossed a lawsuit brought against the city of Buffalo accusing city officials of improperly administrating a request for qualifications process to select new operators for marina and adjacent restaurant spaces. The Western New York Water Development Group, LLC, a group submitted to the request for qualifications but was not selected, sued the city, claiming that the process was designed to benefit Marina Management Group, LLC, the group that was awarded the contract to run the marina and restaurants. State Supreme Court Justice Jana Siwak granted the city's motion to dismiss the lawsuit from the bench Monday, her secretary confirmed. Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swanekamp said the dismissal of the lawsuit now gives the selected operators more certainty as they work to secure slip holders and get its restaurants ready for the boating season. We're just happy moving forward, Swanekamp said. So now those folks can get slip holders the information they need to get their rentals done for the year. And I'm looking forward to seeing the restaurant mix that we get out there and improving the space for the upcoming season. Mark Byrne, the attorney for the group that brought the lawsuit, did not immediately respond to an email seeking comment. In the lawsuit, the complainant said the city had a compressed timeline for the request for qualifications process, did not lawfully comply with the Freedom of Information Law request, and had improper contact with the winning bidders during the process, among other complaints. Prior to commencing this proceeding, petitioners undertook multiple good faith efforts to raise concern regarding the RFQ process and to seek corrective action from city officials and the Common Council, according to court documents. The request for qualifications process, which played out in the final months of former Mayor Christopher Scanlon's time in office, has been the subject of debate and controversy in Common Council's chambers, where the city comptroller's office and city council members have raised concerns over details of the agreement, and where Yvetta Applewhite Oper, an operator of Evelina's Kitchen, accused the former administration of giving an unfair advantage to Marina Management Group, LLC. Applewhite would have run the restaurants for Western New York Waterfront Development, LLC, had they been selected, but told the Buffalo News that she was not involved in a lawsuit. Members of Scanlon's former administration have denied any wrongdoing. Scanlon returned to his South District Council seat at the beginning of the year when Mayor Sean Ryan took office. Members of the Ryan administration have also said they found the process to be above board and have moved forward with the selected operators. Department of Public Works Commissioner Nolan Skipper, who led the request for qualifications process, attested in court documents tied to the notion to dismiss that Western New York Waterfront Development, LLC, had the same opportunity to be selected as other applicants. This was an orderly and measured review process, and the petitioner had the same opportunity as other applicants, Skipper said in the document. Applewhite has been operating out of one of the restaurant spaces under an agreement with Angelo Cana Jr. One of the restaurant operators contracted with the city and had booked out events for months, but Cana's contract was terminated in November, and Applewhite lost the space as a result. City officials and council members have said that while the situation was unfortunate for Applewhite, her arrangement under Cana was not permitted because all the subleases partnerships required council approval, which she did not have. Jason Davison, who will run the restaurant operations for Marina Management Group, LLC, said in a text message the group is happy to be moving forward with its plans. We've been focused on operations for the season and never thought the suit had any merit, Davison said.
Well, maybe things will get going. Meanwhile, things to get going. Matt Glynn reports that Duville has attained peak enrollment at its medical school. Duville University said the inaugural class of its College of Osteopathic Medicine is fully enrolled at 90 students, And renovations are underway at the medical school's eventual permanent home at 285 Delaware Avenue. Duvill's College of Osteopathic Medicine is set to begin classes this fall at its West Side campus. Plans call for the medical school to move into the Delaware Avenue location, an office building owned by a Uniland Development affiliate, in the fall of next year. Duvill said it is continuing to accept applications for the College of Osteopathic Medicine for its wait list, as well as for the fall 2027 entering class. The university said 46% of the first cohort of students are from New York. Duvill said its first class was filled ahead of schedule, with applicants whose academic credentials exceeded initial expectations. This milestone reflects both the strength of our academic foundation and the confidence students are placing in Duville as they choose where to begin their medical careers, said Lori Clemo, Duville's president. Duville plans to expand the medical school's enrollment over time to a projected 720 physicians by 2031. Amid renovations at 285 Delaware, Reese's Deli has extended its lease and will continue to operate throughout construction, the university said. So, exciting developments at Duville University.
Yeah. Well, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. It's now 19 minutes past the hour, and we move on to sports. And let's see what's going on out there in the sports world. The week-to-week loss of Carrick is a blow to the Sabres. This is from Lake Harrington. Center Sam Carrick was one of the best acquisitions of the trade deadline in the entire NFL. A 34-year-old just 2 years removed from playing in the Stanley Cup final with Edmonton, who gave the Buffalo Sabres loads of veteran savvy and a boost in the faceoff circle. With 5 goals in 13 games, Carrick gave the club surprising offensive production. And his punch wasn't limited to putting pucks in the net, as Carrick showed a penchant for the physical parts of the game as well. That, however, has landed him on the injured list. Carrick is going to be out on a week-to-week basis, Coach Lindy Ruff announced after Thursday's morning skate in Canadian Tire Center following a fall that ended a fight Tuesday against New York Islanders captain Anders Lee. He injured his arm. It's going to take some time for him, was Ruff's cryptic update prior to the game against the Ottawa Senators, which we did lose, didn't we? Pretty bad. The Sabres will continue to monitor Carrick. Ruff, like most coaches, gets tighter on injury updates into the season and would only say if the veteran has an arm injury. And although timetables for injured players essentially disappear in the playoffs, Ruff made it clear the Sabres have not ruled out Carrick's return during the postseason. And there's plenty of time ahead. The first round will start April 18th or 19th and likely carry into the first week of May, which would already put Carrick's month out of the lineup if the Sabres were to advance to the second round. He really played well for us. He's found a real good role, Ruff said. We're looking at him helping us with faceoffs. He was with that fourth line scoring important goals. It's a loss, but you've got to have somebody step in and make up for a body that's going out. Leah drilled Sabres center Josh Norris into a hit into the glass from behind the second period. At the face-off to start the third, Carrick made Lee answer, and the pair went at it 3 seconds after the puck was dropped, with it ending in a bad result for the Sabres as Carrick lost his balance. And, okay, I'm on the wrong page. Uh-oh. There's so many words for it and no words for it at the same time, said fellow fourth liner Beck Malliston. You're disappointed for him. Since he's made a huge surge to our team on the fourth line. He's been playing some great hockey, and the short time we've known him, he's an incredible teammate. That shows him what he's doing right there in that spot. Carrick was replaced in the lineup Thursday by Josh Dunn, who likewise possesses a solid physical game. Ruff also can go to Tyson Kozak in that spot when he expects more of a skating flow to a matchup. It's one of those situations that is such a fluke incident right at the end of a fight, Malliston said. Both guys got their licks in and are kind of spinning around the way on ice. It's a weird twist. So upsetting, said Dunn, who has 1 goal and 3 assists in 31 games. He's standing up for a teammate. Such a hard thing to do, and it's brutal. A tough way to get hurt. Hopefully he's back soon, but it's just such a shame. He's doing the right thing, being a great teammate. He's been a great teammate the whole time. Dunn had some success earlier this season on the line with Mallinson and Peyton Krebs, and has been playing some with Jordan Greenway, who was slated to be his left winger Thursday. That's obviously the beauty of our team right now. The guys waiting in the wings have played a lot of hockey, either in this season or throughout their careers, Mallinson said. We have a lot of trust in every single guy that's going to be able to step into the lineup to do their job and be effective. Dunn said he was looking forward to be reunited with Mallinson. His forecheck is unbelievable, and playing with him and Greenway, they do such a good job of protecting pucks, Dunn said. They're good players and have a lot of zero zone time because when they get the puck, it's hard to take it from them. It allows us to have a lot of opportunity. So we'll see how that pans out, but last night was just a disaster.
Well, on the hardwood, a March Madness masterpiece might be on tap. Get your popcorn, kick up your feet, and get ready for what shapes up to be an epic showdown in the Final Four nightcap Saturday night. Michigan and Arizona, top-seeded teams in the NCAA tournament after being at or near the top of the AP Top 25 all season, will face off with a spot in the championship game on Monday night at stake. The nation's top two teams in KenPom rankings will be on the same court at the Final Four for just the second time since 2015. Yesterday, Michigan was favored by 1.5 against Arizona. It was a slight favorite over the Wildcats to win the national title, according to BetMGM Sportsbook. Connecticut and Illinois will meet in the first game tomorrow night at Indianapolis. The Wolverines and Wildcats, who are a combined 71-5, are not used to playing in closely contested games. Since the tournament's expansion to 64 teams in 1985, this is the first Final Four matchup with teams that won each of their 4 previous games by double digits. And as the point spread suggests, the game looks like it will be up for grabs. Michigan averages 87.7 points, barely a point more than Arizona scores per game. The Wildcats allow 68.8 points per game, 0.8 of a point less than the Wolverines give up. Here's a look at some of the matchups. Michigan opened the season scoring 69 points in the first half of a 121-78 win over Oakland and didn't cool off. The Wolverines, that's Michigan, are the first team to score 90-plus points in 4 double-digit wins in the NCAA tournament. They have scored 381 points entering the Final Four, trailing just Kentucky's 388 points in 1993 and Oklahoma's 387 in 1988. Michigan star Yaxel Lindborg, an Associated Press All-America player, has 20-plus points in 3 straight games, including a 27-point performance against Tennessee in the regional final. And it doesn't mention his defensive contributions, which I noticed are considerable as I was watching. 5 of his teammates are scoring in double figures, and a 6th is averaging 9.5 points on a pass-happy team. Arizona likewise is very balanced offensively. Braden Burries and Jaden Bradley, honorable mention AP All-America players, combined and average nearly 30 points a game as part of a starting lineup with 5 double-digit scorers. 7 players in the regular rotation have scored at least 20 in a game, and 8 players have shared or led the team in scoring in a game this season. The Wildcats ranked number 4 nationally in paint points during the regular season at 42.7 per game, and were 360th of 365 division teams by attempting just 16 three-pointers per game, 7 fewer than the average team. Pounding the ball inside also helps them get to the line. Arizona is shooting 18-plus more free throws than opponents in the tournament. Arizona's size has been an advantage all season, but Michigan also has length in the front court. The Wildcats' defense is anchored by 7'2" Matías Krivas, an adept shot blocker, and he will likely square off with 7'3" center Ade Mara. Arizona also has 6'8" freshman Koa Pete and 6'8" 250-pound reserve Toby Awaka to create problems for opponents. The Wildcats' guards are big and agile, able to play aggressively up top because of the size behind them. Coach Tommy Lloyd wants the Wildcats to play tough defense without fouling, something they've succeeded at, making more free throws than opposing teams have attempted. I had to read that twice to believe it. Michigan turns defense into offense, pressuring the ball all over the court to cause turnovers and trigger its fast break. Mara has 100 blocks, setting a single-season record. and the team has blocked at least 8 shots in each of its 4 games in March Madness. Morris Johnson, a 6'9" forward, and Lendeborg have combined to block 70 shots to give the team 3 players to protect the rim. The Wolverines also throw an array of traps at teams, forcing turnovers that allow them to turn up the tempo. Both coaches might be high on North Carolina's wish list to replace fired coach Hubert Davis. Lloyd spent 21 years as an assistant at Gonzaga, helping coach Mark Few turn the Zags from a mid-major from eastern Washington no one had heard of into a national powerhouse. He's been excellent at making adjustments, allowing the Wildcats to turn close games at halftime into lopsided wins, as they did by overcoming a 7-point halftime deficit to beat Purdue 79-64 in the Elite Eight. Michigan coach Dusty May had made the most of the transfer portal, plucking players out of it in each of his 2 years to remarkably rebuild a program that had lost a school record's 24 games 2 years ago before firing former Fab Five player Juwan Howard. May's staff looks for players who like to pass, believing it's an unselfish characteristic that paves the way to be a good teammate. The former student manager at Indiana under Bob Knight is making his second trip to the Final Four as a head coach, following Florida Atlantic's improbable run in 2023. Moving on. Pro basketball.
Yes. The Celtics Tatum said he's not at his best yet, and that's scary. This is from the Associated Press. Boston star Jason Tatum doesn't know how much longer it'll take him to feel like he's playing basketball at his best level again. That might be a scary statement. Tatum, in only his 12th game back after tearing his Achilles in last season's playoffs, did something he's never done. No Boston player has ever done since 2010 that only 2 other Celtics have done in the franchise's illustrious history. His numbers against the Miami Heat on Wednesday might 25 points, 18 rebounds, and 11 assists. Wow, that's a monster of a triple-double, and it came with him looking to regain his top form after not playing for nearly a year. That's impressive. Mm-hmm. I wish I had a definitive answer, Tatum, someone asked after the game how much longer he'll need to feel like he's back to where he was before tearing the Achilles. Sounds cliche. I feel a little better every game, and I don't know how long it's going to take to be back to who I was, or hopefully better. But the goal is just to continue to stack days. Rajon Rondo had triple-double with that many points, rebounds, and assists for the Celtics back in the 2010 playoffs. Larry Bird did it twice in regular season play, first in 1982 and then again in 1990. In Boston history, it never happened outside of those 3 games. Larry Bird, boy, that was a legend. Until now. I can tell he's still out of shape, Miami star Bam Adebayo said, smiling when asked about his U.S. Olympics teammate. But when you consider somebody like that your brother, when we've known each other since we were like 12, and you see what he's gone through, and obviously checking up on him throughout the rehab phase and the down days he's had, you're proud of him for pushing through it and putting himself out there this season. Boy, he ought to be a bomb when he gets out there, if he's improving. He's still trying to find his way, still trying to impact winning. You tip your hat off to someone who's been through that and still trying to play. The shot isn't fully back yet. Tatum is only at 40% from the field so far in his comeback, but he's averaging 21.3 points and 9.8 rebounds per contest in his first 12 games, numbers that suggest he's not too far away from the elite all-NBA levels he's been at over the past several years. To me, since he's back, he hasn't missed a beat, Celtics Joe Mazzulla said. The Celtics have 6 games left in the regular season before likely opening the Eastern Conference playoffs as number 2 seed. They're 4 games behind number 1 Detroit and 2.5 games against number 3 New York, so that second spot seems like it'll likely be the landing point. It wasn't clear when the season started if Tatum would be able to play, and even when he came back, it wasn't clear how impactful he would be. Those questions aren't being asked anymore. It's been 46 weeks since his surgery. Yes, every Tuesday he updates the total in his mind, and even if he doesn't feel like his old self yet, the stats say he's either there or right on the brink of being there. Definitely the hardest thing I ever went through, Tatum said. I mean, I never took that much time off from basketball. The challenges that you have to face mentally in the long, dark moments and the dark days, I mean, it's tough, but I'm proud of the fact that I've made it this far. Wow.
Well, on the local high school scene, Laney Babich doesn't need a trophy case to remember what winning feels like. The All-Western New York Player of the Year knows it in the way her teammates showed up on the first day of tryouts, focused and unbothered by the weight of being reigning state champions. Orchard Park won the New York State Public High School Athletic Association's Class AA softball title last season, finishing 23-4 to win the program's first title since 2015. Now, with significant roster turnover, the Quakers are attempting something far harder than winning a state title, capturing back-to-back championships. It's a feat that's only ever happened 3 times in the A classes. Orchard Park graduated 2 of its top 4 hitters from last season's championship lineup. The 5th best hitter, Mae McDermott, an All-Western New York honorable mention last season, and Notre Dame commit, transferred to a school in Charlotte, North Carolina. Both of the team's top pitchers have graduated, leaving coach Brittany Schermerhorn to rebuild the rotation from scratch, while the rest of Western New York teams have their sights set on making a name for themselves off the Quakers. This is definitely a different start to the season, coming off a win instead of a loss, Babich said. As much of it is pressure, it definitely does going to help us start off the year strong, because we all know after winning it, what the goal is again. She paused, then said the quiet part out loud. Obviously, the goal is to win it again.
Well, you were listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 34 minutes past the hour. And we're going to move on to advice from Asking Eric Tanis. Dear Eric, for years I was in a toxic, abusive relationship. Fortunately, I ended it. My family and friends supported me along the way. Now I'm in a new relationship with a healthy person, but the tables have turned. Through couples and individual therapy, I've realized that due to an undiagnosed neurodivergent and childhood trauma, I've become the abuser, that is, verbally and emotionally. I am sick to realize this and aggressively and actively trying to change, and here's the problem. When I share about some of the struggles I'm going through, almost none of my friends or family believe I could be causing any problems in my current relationship. They all take my side and assume my current partner must be gaslighting or manipulating me to believing that I'm the problem. This is simply not true. How should I navigate these situations? I'm trying to grow and improve myself, yet my family and friends mostly are so defensive of me because of my last relationship. And it's signed, Trying to Change. And the answers. Dear Change, your friends and family may not be in the best position to help you through this part of your journey. Now I want to caution that isolation from friends and family is one of the signs of an abusive relationship, so I'm not suggesting that you pull away from them, especially if they're expressing concerns about your current relationship. However, as you noted, because they're not privy to everything you're working through in therapy, they may not have a full picture of who you are. Talk about this in your individual therapy. Ask your therapist to help you test your thinking and actions, work on tactics for sharing yourself and your journey with your loved ones in ways that could support your goals. Think about your objectives. If you want to communicate in a healthier way in your relationships, you might share that what you're trying to do moving forward rather than what you feel you did wrong in the past. This is ultimately not choosing sides, so keep the focus on how you want to show up in healthy ways in all your relationships. Unless their support and keeping you accountable to your best intentions, and while you're doing that, consider taking a step back from this relationship. It may serve you both to have time to work on yourselves before reuniting in, hopefully, a healthier way. It's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Very difficult. And dear Eric, for more than 30 years, I've gathered with old friends at a remote cabin in the early spring. We've all known each other for a long time. We fish, cook, hike, play cards late into the night, and drink beer or cocktails. One of these friends over the last 5 years has become more and more obnoxious in his late-night drinking. is at a point where a couple of the other guests will not come if he is there. Last year, he was out of control, drunk, yelling at 2 a.m. and keeping everyone awake. He could not be stopped. The next morning, he was unapologetic and acting like, what's the big deal? I'm not invited in this year, and for some reason, I'm uncomfortable with that decision. On emails or phone calls, he's the old friendly person I've known for years. He's well aware of what he did last year. We all told him, and when people say his behavior was unacceptable, he brushes it off and says, yeah, I get it. He will not be invited anymore, and I'm still unsure how to handle this. Do I tell him outright what's going on? Let him figure it out himself. At this point, do I owe him an explanation? To be honest, I don't even want to discuss it. He only tried to worm his way back into an invitation. I want the problem to just go away. And it's signed, Closed Cabin. Now the answer is, Dear Captain, it sounds to me like you've already given him an explanation. He's chosen to brush it off. I'm not sure much more is warranted. However, because he's been included for the last 30 years, it seems unlikely you'll be able to avoid having at least a conversation about it. He probably expects an invitation and might reach out when one doesn't come. It may be easier to just address it directly and succinctly. It also might be an opportunity to express your concern over his worsening drinking and ask him to get help. That's of greater importance than elaborating on the group's disinvitation. Depending on the structure of your group, the responsibility of telling him he's off the guest list may not need to fall squarely on you. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, see if you can tag someone else in. Yeah, that's a tough situation, but I get the issue.
Well, he's basically in denial about the fact that he's a problem. You're not going to get through to somebody like that.
I know too many people like that.
Best not invite him. Well, we have a very exciting story to report here from the Associated Press. Alana Richer, Eric Tucker, Michael Balsamo, and Michelle Price all have a hand on this article. President Trump said yesterday Pam Bondi is out as his Attorney General. And the contentious tenure of a loyalist who upended the Justice Department's culture of independence from the White House, oversaw large-scale firings of career employees, and moved aggressively to investigate the Republican president's perceived enemies. The departure followed months of scrutiny over the Justice Department's handling of files related to the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking investigation and failed efforts to meet Trump's unwavering demands for criminal cases against his adversaries. As Trump's own frustrations mounted, he began privately discussing firing Bondi. People familiar with the matter say, Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend who faithfully served as my Attorney General over the past year, Trump said in a statement. He added, we love Pam and she'll be transitioning to a much-needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. Yeah. Did he say the other night the Iran war is going to end in the near future? Oh, well, it depends on how you define near future, I suppose.
Yeah.
Trump named Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, one of his former personal lawyers, as the acting Attorney General. 3 people familiar with the matter told the Associated Press on Thursday he has privately discussed Lee Zeldin, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, as a permanent pick. In her own statement, Bondi called the job the honor of a lifetime and said she would be working over the next month to transition the position to Blanche. Bondi came into office 14 months ago, pledging that she would not play politics with the Justice Department. But she quickly set out to do Trump's bidding, heaping lavish praise at congressional hearings and White House events, firing prosecutors deemed insufficiently loyal to the president, and opening investigations into his political foes. The intense turmoil contributed to the resignations of hundreds of employees, with the norm-breaking actions stirring concern that the department was being wielded as a tool to advance Trump's personal and political interests. Pam Bondi oversaw an unprecedented weaponization of the Justice Department that brought our nation's rule of law to its knees, said Adam Schiff, a California Democrat. Bondi rejected accusations that she politicized the Justice Department and said her mission was to restore the individual's credibility after overreach by President Joe Biden's Democratic administration, which included 2 federal criminal cases against Trump. Bondi's defenders said she worked to refocus the department to better tackle illegal immigration and violent crime and brought much-needed change to an agency they believed unfairly targeted conservatives. Bondi's public embrace of the president, however, marked a sharp departure from her predecessors, who generally took pains to maintain an arm's-length distance from the White House to protect the impartiality of investigations and prosecutions. Bondi postured herself as Trump's chief supporter and protector, praising and defending him in congressional hearings and placing a banner with his face on the exterior of Justice Department headquarters. She called for an end to the weaponization of law enforcement, she said occurred under the Biden administration, even though Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith, the special counsel who produced 2 cases against Trump, have said they followed the facts, the evidence, and the law in their decision-making. Bondi's critics, meanwhile, said she was the one who had politicized the agency to do the president's bidding. You've turned the People's Department of Justice into Trump's instrument of revenge, Representative Jamie Maryland, a top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, said at a hearing in February. Bondi delivered a combative performance but few substantive answers at that hearing as she angrily insulted her Democratic questioners with name-calling, praised Trump over the performance of the stock market. The Dow is up over 50,000 right now. That was then. And openly aligned herself as in sync with a president whom she painted as a victim of past impeachments and investigations. Even Republicans began to challenge her, with the Republican-led House Oversight Committee last month issuing a subpoena to her for her to appear for a closed-door interview about the Epstein files. Under Bond's leadership, the department opened investigations into a string of Trump foes, including Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, New York Attorney General Letitia James, former FBI Director James Comey, and former CIA Director John Brennan. The high-profile prosecutions of Comey and James were short-lived, as they were quickly thrown out by a judge who ruled that the prosecutor who brought the cases was illegally appointed. Trump repeatedly praised and defended Bondi publicly, but also showed flashes of impatience with his Attorney General's efforts to meet his demands to prosecute his rivals. In one extraordinary social media post last year, Trump called on Bondi to move quickly to prosecute his foes, including James and Comey, telling her, "We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility." Bondi oversaw the exodus of thousands of career employees, both through firings and voluntary departures, including lawyers who prosecuted violent attacks on police at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, environmental, civil rights, and ethics enforcers, counterterrorism prosecutors, and others, all gone. She struggled to overcome early stumbles over the Epstein files that angered conservatives eager for government bombshells about the case, which has long fascinated conspiracy theorists. She herself had fed the conspiracy theory machine with a suggestion in a 2025 Fox News Channel interview that Epstein's client list was sitting on her desk for review. The department later acknowledged that no such document exists. Bondi was ridiculed over a move to hand out binders of Epstein files to conservative influencers at the White House, only for it to be later revealed that the documents included no new revelations. And despite promises that more files were going to become public, the Justice Department in July said no more would be released, prompting Congress to pass a bill to force the agency to do so. Bondi, who defended Trump during his first impeachment trial, was his second choice to lead the Justice Department, picked for the role after former Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida withdrew his name from consideration amid scrutiny over sex trafficking allegations.
Oh, boy.
I can't think of any better way to say it. Oh, boy.
Good grief. And more Trump news. Trump appeals for patience on Iran war. This is from Amir Madani from the Associated Press. President Trump used his first major address since launching his war in Iran to assure Americans that all of his military objectives will be completed shortly, and urged an increasingly skeptical electorate to give him a little bit more time. Trump, in his Wednesday evening speech, dialed back the bluster that's dominated his rhetoric in recent days as world markets convulse and a badly battered Iran is still landing some effective blows on Gulf neighbors' infrastructure and U.S. bases. But the Republican president's promise to finish the job hardly built confidence with a jittery market as oil prices surged and Asian stocks fell as he vowed that the U.S. will continue to hit Iran very hard. He offered no detail about the state of negotiations with Iran that could bring about a promised end game that he insists could come in a matter of weeks. There was also no overt lashing out at NATO allies for failing to fall in line and help them reopen this critical Strait of Hormuz waterway, something White House officials had said would be a prominent part of his roughly 20-minute address. The U.S. will continue to hit Iran hard for the next 2 or 3 weeks, he said, without saying how much longer the war would last. But he offered a plea to Americans to show a little patience. We are in this military operation so powerful, so brilliant, against one of the most powerful countries for 32 days, and the country has been eviscerated and essentially is really no longer a threat, Trump said. This is a true investment in your children and your grandchildren's future. The whole world is watching, and they can't believe the power, strength, and brilliance. Trump finds himself not only negotiating with an enemy that refuses to throw in the towel, but also dealing with an American tolerance for conflict that's being stretched. Most Americans believe recent U.S. military against Iran has gone too far, and many are worried about affording gasoline, according to an AP NORC poll conducted in mid-March, a couple of weeks after the war started. While Trump is deploying more warships and troops to the Middle East, about 59% of Americans say U.S. military in Iran has been excessive. Meanwhile, 45% are extremely or very concerned about being able to afford gas in the next few months, up from 30% in an AP NORC poll conducted shortly after Trump won re-election with promises that he would improve the economy and lower the cost of living. We see how that's worked out. Americans, Trump noted, have certainly shown patience during times of war. American involvement in World War I, he said, lasted 1 year, 7 months, and 5 days. World War II lasted 3 years, 8 months, and 25 days. The Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. And the Vietnam War lasted for 19 years, 5 months, and 29 days. Iraq went on for 8 years, 8 months, and 28 days. And hours before his address, Trump seemed to reflect on the domestic pressure he's feeling to wrap up the war. Speaking at a private lunch at the White House to mark Easter, Trump argued that the U.S. could very easily use this moment to take Iran's oil. It is unfortunate, he lamented, that there did not seem to be patience among American people for such an effort. They want to see it end, he said. He added, people in the country sort of say, just win, you're winning so big, just win, come home. And I'm okay with that, too. Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, said Trump's speech was grounded in a reality that only exists in Donald Trump's mind. The president, Democrats fume offered no plan on how he would go about opening Hormuz, the critical waterway for oil tankers that a battered Iran has effectively choked off, even though Trump claims it's been defeated. For allies worried about a global economy that's been rattled by rising oil prices, Trump suggested they buy oil from the United States of America and build up some delayed courage and help the U.S. secure the strait. Trump made no attempt to answer his European critics who say he's entered his war of choice against Iran without consulting global allies, but is now expecting the world to help him fix an unintended damage that it has caused. We're losing this war, Murphy added. We cannot destroy all their missiles or drones, nor their nuclear program. Iran projects more power in the region than they did before the war, especially if now they control the Strait of Hormuz. We are spending billions we don't have and losing American lives in a war that is destabilizing the world and making us look feckless. Well, buy oil from us. Why isn't our gas's price lower? Never mind.
Meanwhile, environmental groups have filed multiple lawsuits against the Trump administration over its decision earlier this week to broadly exempt the oil and gas industry from requirements to protect all endangered species in the Gulf of Mexico. In one federal lawsuit filed yesterday in Washington, D.C., a coalition of 4 Gulf advocacy organizations argue that the Rarely Used Endangered Species Committee, which met Tuesday for the first time in more than 30 years, bypassed long-standing rules with the vague justification of national security. Calling it an unprecedented blanket exemption, the coalition said the decision made by the so-called God Squad would bring vulnerable Gulf wildlife closer to extinction, including turtles, corals, birds, and the Rice's whale, one of the world's rarest species with an estimated 50 remaining in the wild. The coalition is made up of Healthy Gulf, Friends of the Earth, Turtle Island Restoration Network, and the Sierra Club. In a separate federal complaint filed Wednesday, the International Nonprofit Natural Resources Defense Council made a similar argument, calling the broad national security rationale arbitrary and capricious. The Center for Biological Diversity, another environmental group, also amended a pre-existing lawsuit to contest the Tuesday vote. On Tuesday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said litigation from environmental advocacy groups is blocking the nation's energy supply, and that exempting all Gulf oil and gas activities from wildlife protections is essential to national security. These legal battles waste critical government resources and make it impossible for energy companies to plan and invest in new projects, Hegseth said. When development in the Gulf is chilled, we are prevented from producing the energy we need as a country and as a department. Several federal agencies did not immediately respond to emails from the Tampa Bay Times seeking comment on the lawsuits. During the Zoom news conference yesterday afternoon, the environmentalists emphasized that their lawsuit doesn't seek to stop oil and gas drilling in the Gulf, which has surged even while companies have been bound by rules to protect endangered species. But they warned that letting this stand would allow the country's defense leaders to decide, without providing evidence, whether national security merited species going extinct. This exemption will not bring down the cost of gasoline by 1 red cent, said Drew Caputo of Earth Justice. But the cost of such an action could be enormous, particularly to the Rice's whale that is literally at risk of being no more and could be rendered extinct by this decision, he said. Extinction is forever. Steve Mishuda, the lead attorney on the coalition's case, referenced the last time the Endangered Species Committee was convened in 1992 when it had to make a decision on spotted owls. At that time, public hearings in Oregon lasted weeks, Mishuda said, during which witnesses presented evidence in a stadium-like venue. This week's meeting lasted around 15 minutes. We literally should not be having this discussion today, Mishuda said. There's been no instance of the committee meeting and talking about an exemption and deciding the fate of species in less time than it takes to watch a rerun of a Friends episode. That is almost unfathomable for a decision of this weight.
Well, we're coming to an end of our reading time, and I hardly know which comic to pick because there's so many truly funny
some
ones.
Good ones.
But I'm going to go with Zitz. You got Jeremy and his tattooed, spike-haired friend standing there, and there's in front of a row of lockers, and one of them you hear this bam, bam, bam. Jeremy opens it, and a little character jumps out, the little goony thing, and he's screaming, "I'm free, I'm free." And he says, "You really should totally put that on your resume." And Jeremy says, "Well, how much public service credit do you get for letting a freshman out of his locker?"
Good one. Yeah. Another good one was Family Circus.
Yes.
Mom has got a big pile of laundry and shirts on hangers and so forth. Everything's all folded and ready. And she's saying, "Finally, that finishes the laundry," as the 4 kids come running in all dirty and messy from outside. Oh,
yeah,
well.
Been there. Well, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today. It's Good Friday, April 3rd of 2026, 2 days from Easter. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. And your readers today have been
Don Williams
and J.J. Patek, and thank you for listening.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which